They say that you are the average of the friends and company you keep. So I want us to improve our average together. I want us to become smarter, more successful, healthier, happier, and more fulfilled in our everyday lives. Think about it. The stronger we are as individuals, the more we can serve those around us. I'll be interviewing friends that happen to be experts in their field, and I invite you to join in on the conversation. So, welcome to the I Have Cool Friends podcast, a show that sparks inspirational conversations with experts about business, wellness, and personal development. All right, welcome back to the I Have Cool Friends podcast. I am very honored to have Anne Stewart on the show today. She's one of the leaders in health and wellness right now as an integrative nutrition health coach, and she runs a leading private coaching practice with a focus on permanent weight loss. She's the founder of the Awesome Inside Out movement, author of the e-course Meditate Slim, and an advisor to international wellness brands. When she's not at home, you can find her leading transformative wellness experiences around the globe. Or when she is at home, you can find her and her husband, Craig, having beautiful and large dinner parties and networking functions, which is actually how we met. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so deeply honored and grateful to have this conversation with you. And I'm just grateful for our friendship and that we've gotten to know each other a bit over the last year. And I miss you in LA, and I miss seeing your face. And hopefully this crazy time will be over soon.
I know it's been such a wild ride. And I actually had John Levy as a guest on the show. So listeners know the Influencers Dinner, and it was actually at Sarah and Craig's house. And that was just a very strange experience for me, but I loved it, obviously, because I've stayed connected to so many people.
Yeah, it was amazing to have you. And I'm grateful for John. And I don't know if you know this, but John and I were roommates years ago. He actually let me live with him when I was moving back to New York and I was struggling. And so he has a really, beautiful place in my heart just for the gratitude for him and what he's done and all the introductions that he's shared with me.
Yeah. And I can tell that, and just meeting you and a lot of other people that he's connected me to, like just a group of good people, you know, and yes, I mean, a lot of people that I have on my show are very successful, but I think at the root of all of the people that I curate on here, everyone has such a good heart, which is very important to me. And I know you share that same belief.
Definitely.
And I have to bring up a funny story. So we were at the Influencers Dinner, and it was a pretty small group. And then, a lot more people came. And I remember you pulled me aside and you were like, I never do this, but we're actually hosting an event tomorrow at our house. Do you want to come back?
Yep, that sounds like me. It's like, if I'm drawn to someone and I'm like, they have amazing energy, I'm like, I want them in my world.
Yeah. And so when I left the Influencers Dinner, I have all of my friends like, this is sketchy. You're just going to a strange address with people, no one you know, like as a young girl in LA. I'm like, I'll be fine. So I leave and everyone's like, how was it? I'm like, it's amazing. I'm actually going back tomorrow. They're like, are you sure you're not in a cult? Like, can we talk about like what happened? You're not being invited to?
I know. It's always strange with John's invites because you really don't know what you're getting yourself into. At least with our invites, they're a little bit more descriptive. And you're like, oh, there's going to be a bunch of entrepreneurs here and we're going to do TED style talks and hang out by the pool. So they have a little bit more reference, but with his, there's none.
Yeah. A little bit more of an agenda in there, but yeah. So a little story for us to reflect back on. But when I met you, I could just tell that you love to help people. Part of the Influencers Dinner is getting to know someone without knowing their last name or what they do. And even just my few conversations at the beginning with you, I could tell that you had a big heart and that you really were passionate about helping people, even though at the beginning I didn't know what exactly you did for a living. But I'm grateful that you're able to share some of that knowledge you've lived through today. So when someone asked you on a plane, what do you do? What is the quick Reader's Digest version that you usually share?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the short sentence is I support individuals around the world in shifting their relationship with food and their body to create a more positive, loving approach to a life that they love. And it's really about helping them cultivate, again, this relationship to food and cultivate a relationship to their bodies that is rooted in self-love and rooted from a place of self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem. And I truly believe that when we heal our relationship with our bodies, we heal our relationship with food, because when we're able to really connect to our bodies as this vessel and this vehicle to experience life and to experience what we want to actually do on this planet, we will be motivated to take care of our bodies. We'll be motivated to stay healthy. We'll be motivated to have this beautiful experience with our bodies so that it can carry us forward throughout our lives. And then we'll be more inclined to eat healthy food and move our bodies and do the very things that we know at the core of who we are keep us healthy.
Yeah. And it seems like you have every credential and certification in the book surrounding health. So what made you want to become so invested in this industry?
Yeah. So what I do today is really based on my own personal journey. So I grew up in a really holistic health household, so much so that when my father was diagnosed with the heartbreaking news of terminal cancer, he decided to not actually go the Western route to extend his life, but he was like, I'm actually going to cure this cancer. And so he became vegan and he started meditating every day and doing yoga. And within 7 months, the cancer was completely gone. And at that point, this sparked a light inside of me that really started this journey of questioning why other people weren't having this conversation or knowing about the fact that we can use food in certain circumstances to actually heal chronic sickness. And at the same time, ironically, I was scouted to model. And within a few weeks, I developed an eating disorder that lasted for over a decade, to the point where I was sitting across a doctor in the ER, and the doctor said, if you do not make a change right now, you are absolutely going to lose your life to this career. And I remember at that time, I felt so much shame and guilt because I grew up in this holistic household. I knew the power of food for healing, and yet I was using food to literally destroy my own body, or my relationship with food was destroying my body. And so it became this interesting journey where I had to go back and really look at, okay, how did I get to where I am? Why am I struggling with my relationship with food and my body? Is it very much related to the fashion industry and working in this industry, or is there a deeper cause to this experience, right? And so because of that, I went on this journey, and the journey really was about going back to school for nutrition. In that process, I recognized that my nutrition degrees weren't actually helping me heal my relationship with my body, in the sense that the more I learned about nutrition, the worse my anxiety got around food. And even when I got my picture taken, or I was in a place where I, would see myself in a reflection of a mirror, the anxiety was getting worse and worse. And so I had to go on this journey of really reprogramming my subconscious mind, looking at, okay, what are the parts of myself that really need to be healed? And I was blessed to meet a seventh lineage guru who I intuitively felt like I needed to work with. And he told me, the first thing he said was, you have to unlearn the way that you were taught to suffer. You have to start taking radical responsibility for your inner world and for this victimhood mentality. And at that place, I started to really reprogram the subconscious mind, my emotions, my feelings. And that really is what led me to the work I do today. And I started applying these principles to my practice, and the results were amazing. No longer were clients jumping from coach to coach to coach, but they were finally getting to the root cause of the disordered eating and their relationship with yo-yo dieting and so forth. And so, yeah, it's been a long journey. I'm very open and vulnerable to talking about it. I think for a long time I was very scared because I thought that people would judge me because I had all these nutrition certifications, but I realized that that actually isn't serving anyone by hiding behind my story or hiding behind my past eating disorders. I thought that if people found out that I had an eating disorder, people would discredit me. But since I've been sharing, it's just been this beautiful experience of so many women coming forward and individuals all over the world sharing that they too have struggled with yo-yo dieting and the weight gain and the weight loss, and really cultivating this inner self-love.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that here. And I know it's probably not an easy thing to share, even this many years later, because it probably deeply affected you a lot during that time, and landing you in the hospital, and all of the things that come with the struggles of having a healthy relationship with food. But it's interesting because I grew up in the gymnastics world, and we're in leotards all the time. I mean, I was training 6 hours a day, 6 days a week on the national team when I was 12. And luckily my individual coach, I mean, the most he talked about food is if I had a really good day, he would say, "What did you eat for lunch?" Eat that every single day. I think more from a superstitious standpoint versus like fuel or any sort of the food component. But I just remember when I made the national team coordinator, Marta Crowley, found out that I had my period and came over and said, "No one your age has your period." Mind you, I was very late starting compared to people my age in school. And she said, "You get your period from having too much body fat." And I just remember hearing that and being like, okay, I think a mature enough mind to realize that that's not rational and normal. So I'm going to like take this, but yeah, that affects you for a day. And then I think I tried like not eating for a day. And then my teammates were like, "Well, that's stupid because you don't have any fuel for, training, that you're going to injure yourself because you don't have fuel." And so, I feel like I was hypersensitive to it at a young age. And I'm not sure I ever went down like the super dark paths, but I've watched a lot of my friends with that happen to it. And it's just, even though such a touchy topic, it is so important, I think, for all the work that you do.
Yeah. And it's important that we start to look at this cultural and societal conditioning, right? Because, she said that to you because that's a belief system that had probably been projected upon her. And so now she's projecting on you. And then had you taken that on, then you could have potentially projected that onto other women or your children. And so it's really important that we start to break down these belief systems that have been going on for years. I just recently did a bunch of research for my book, and I was looking at magazines from 1954, and they were talking about calorie counting and losing weight to cultivate love back then. And so there's this relationship that we have taken on that if we lose weight, we'll love ourselves. If we lose weight, we will feel better about our bodies. If we lose weight, we'll have that confidence to go and get the partner, the career that we have always desired. And and now it's time to break down these beliefs and to really start saying, these aren't true. I'm not going to continue to carry these stories on with me. And what would a new empowered story look like? And what I have found is that we actually can't reference most often the media or even social media. We can't reference most things we've been taught. We can't even really look into our minds, because our minds are basically projections and stories that we've taken on since we were a child. So the truth is often beyond the mind, and that exists within us. And that's our intuition and our deeper knowing and awareness that takes courage to access that place in ourselves. And usually that comes through mindfulness and meditation.
And it's interesting too, you talk about that narrative that we see in the media about, if you lose 5 to 10 pounds, you're going to get X, Y, and Z. And it's like, okay, hypothetically, maybe if you're in a really happy place in your life and you're working out more and you're eating and fueling your body the right way because you're in a good place, maybe in turn, the result is you lose 5 to 10 pounds because you're in a happy state. But it's not the reverse of like, okay, I'm going to lose weight and then. Is that your experience working in this world?
Yeah. And what I always like to do with my clients is I always like to reference what they could have now without losing weight if they stood in that courage. And so I always start with emotion. What are the feelings that you could actually feel now that you're hoping are going to happen on the other side of the weight loss? And what's so interesting is just like addiction gets transferred, so does the desire for an emotion. And so what happens is often people will lose weight and then they don't feel what they're desiring to feel. And then they go to the next thing and hope that in the relationship, they'll feel that. And then in a career, they'll feel that. And so I always like to ask, well, what is the thing that you're desiring now? And most often it's, I want to feel self-love. And so then I remind them that self-love has always existed within you. It's not like the stock market that goes up and down. It's not like a roller coaster. It's actually in you. It's just that you have these projected stories that are overlaying it where you can't access it right now. And so to access it, you have to unlearn, like my coach said, you have to unlearn the way that you were taught to suffer. And that suffering is really based on storytelling. It's the stories that you're telling yourself based on what you've been taught. I believe that we can always have the life that we desire in any body that we're currently living in. It's just that choice to really step into it and courageously step into it. And that requires the deeper work. That requires us to say, okay, well, I had a bad relationship with my mother or my father, or I had trauma in my childhood, or I, was bullied on the playground, and I've been carrying those stories my whole life that I'm not worthy of this self-love. But when we clear out those stories, when we actually heal those stories and we actually experience self-love within us, then that self-love drives our behavior. And that means that we're going to show up to move every day. That means we're going to show up to, and maybe not every day, but you're going to be moving your body, and you're going to be eating healthy, clean foods, and you're going to be taking care of this body that you've been given, whether that's hydrating your body, whether that's turning the computer off and doing some breath work. All of these little practices that we ignore are most often being ignored because we're lacking that self-love to make those choices.
And what a year to talk about self-love, right? I mean, when it seems like everything is going wrong in the world, the one thing that you could probably point to like bring you joy is yourself. And as cliche as that probably sounds, I mean, it is a good opportunity to work on ourselves. But what do you think what role has social media played in self-love?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And a lot of people want to instantly go to social media and just blame. They want to say social media is the reason why women are now, there's this rise of eating disorders and disordered eating. And now we're seeing a rise with men, we're seeing a rise with individuals all over the world. And although social media definitely has reinforced, right, the wounding patterns that exist within us, I want to empower people to step out of the victimhood and step into the radical responsibility. And what that looks like is saying my external world is a reflection of what I'm personally feeling inside. And so as I started to heal myself, I changed who I followed. I changed what I searched. I changed what my external environment looked like. I changed who my friend group was. I changed what career I was in. I literally had to reinvent my entire life. And when we do the inner work, then we no longer can blame the external. And so although social media, I do think is absolutely having an impact, and we absolutely need to look at that, we also need to empower younger generations to say, well, what does self-love, self-worth, and self-confidence and self-esteem feel like in my body and feel like to me? And if I can cultivate those emotions first, then I'm going to be a stance for empowering other individuals online. And I'm going to be a voice that will reflect how I feel. And in that experience, that will change the culture of social media and change our society.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I heard you say in there that I want to just touch on, because I think it's so important that taking ownership piece of your mental health and your connection to food and your body, and whether it's, in your job or in your personal life, just that taking ownership component, I think is so lacking in our world right now. And like you mentioned, it is so easy to go to social media to blame this, and this. And, but remembering that you have the power to cultivate who you follow or what shows up on your feed. And yeah, if you're on the explore page, you don't have that power because they're putting stuff in there. But I read something about a year ago and unfollowed some people that I'm like, that doesn't serve me, or I don't get good feelings or joy from looking at their page. And I've made a point to follow a lot more, like quote pages or people that I look up to personally that I know are spreading, goodness and joy. And you can tell that they radiate self-love, because I do believe that there's an effect of when you see something on Instagram, you want to emulate that. But everybody that's holding a phone has the power to do that. It's just, do you have the will and the want to change your life positively?
Absolutely. And when you do the inner work first, you're no longer going to be looking at a picture and thinking that if you had everything that other person has, you'll be happy on the other side of that. And that's the problem with social media. And instead, you'll look at your own life and you'll find gratitude and joy and happiness and uniqueness, and you'll find your purpose, and you're going to cultivate the impact you want to have. And then when you go back into social media, you're going to say, this is what I stand for. And I no longer stand for the comparison mindset, the jealousy mindset, the ability to go down these stories and these rabbit holes of, I wish that my life existed like her life or like this other person's life. And again, you're going to come back to your uniqueness and your greatness because you've done the inner work and you no longer have those stories driving your behavior. And I also want to point out that most often those stories are subconscious, and it's not your fault that you're feeling certain ways. It's not your fault that you're comparing yourself to other people, or you might be jealous of other people, or you might feel insecure on social media. That's not your fault. But once you're aware of it, then it is your responsibility to take action. So once you become self-aware, and this is really about becoming conscious of our emotions. When you look at a picture and you say, okay, well, I'm starting to notice my heart's racing. I don't feel great right now. I'm starting to think about potentially going to the kitchen to use food to avoid the feeling that I'm feeling, or whatever you're becoming self-aware to, that's your opportunity to shift the behavior in that moment and create a different story and a more empowering story. I always say the best way to change a habit is right before you make a decision. And that's about self-awareness, becoming aware to what's showing up. And that again, and none of this is easy. I want to make that point. It's hard, but it takes that courageous step to say, I'm willing to feel what I'm feeling right now. And I'm allowing myself to choose a different option rather than food to avoid, or the lack of food, or cultivating a negative relationship with food to avoid what's showing up for me. And I'm going to take that courageous step in order to really, again, live from a place of self-love. And people think self-love is this butterflies and unicorns and like rainbows. And I'm like, no, self-love is often the hardest thing you're going to do. Like, it's often going into the depths of pain and having to confront the parts of yourself. And that's what self-love is, because you want a better life.
Wow, Sarah, you're really making everyone want to pursue self-love. Guys, it's going to be so fun. Actually, no, it's actually horrible. You have to go deeply into your soul, feel all the feelings first, and then, heal from that. I think that's really funny. You're really marketing that.
But
well.
on the other side of it is freedom. On the other side of that discomfort. And the thing about self-love is you absolutely will have these feelings of bliss and happiness and joy, but they often exist on the other side of having to do that work. And I think it's just important that people recognize, I think it's similar to self-care. People think self-care is all about manicures and pedicures, but self-care is often doing the very things that are challenging. I know that you just chatted with Ashley Stahl, one of my best friends, and she made a point to me. She was like, self-care is often managing your debt, or having to pay your bills, or having to do the things that you might be avoiding, because if you do those things, then you're going to have this freedom that exists on the other side of it. And you're not going to use food as a way to avoid those experiences because they bring up an emotion that you don't want to feel.
You opened up earlier on this show about, your struggles with food back in the day. What's your relationship around food and your mentality around food now?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, because so often I hear that once you have disordered eating, or you've had an eating disorder, it's going to be part of your experience forever. And it's just a matter of when it returns. And I personally want to debunk that belief, because I've interviewed so many incredible individuals who have had eating disorders who are free from their eating disorders. And although it might be part of your awareness where you might have a thought, that thought no longer impacts my behavior, if that makes sense. So something might come up where I might notice myself going into comparison or jealousy, or I might notice myself moving towards the kitchen to avoid a certain emotion. But in that moment, I am stopping myself and saying, okay, how do I feel what's showing up for me right now in this moment? And how do I reshift the story to, again, create a relationship with food that is one of nourishment, that is one of love, that is one that is rooted in the fact that I get to eat every day. And this is a beautiful blessing. And I get to have the sacred experience that allows me to continue to live my incredible life. And when I can keep going back to that story over and over again, it continues to reprogram those old beliefs. And so no longer am I in this like binge eating cycle. I'm no longer starving myself. I'm no longer in these old patterns that I used to be. And although the thoughts might always be there, I no longer have the behavior driving me. And that what that does is it allows me to no longer go into the shame and the guilt around my behavior because I catch it before.
So do you have a go-to question that you ask yourself, or a go-to mantra whenever you're in a negative space? And I'm thinking that this is not just about food, right? This is about if you're comparing yourself on Instagram or any sort of negative thought about your body, or, being proud of what you've built. Do you have how is this nourishing me? Or how do I feel right now? Like something that listeners, if they're struggling with this, they can just ask themselves in those times.
Yeah, it's absolutely not just about food, because the beautiful thing is our bodies are always changing. As I go into the idea of motherhood, I've even started to question my own beliefs around my body changing with pregnancy. And so in those stories, I've had to say, okay, well, what is the story that I'm holding? Okay, the story that I'm holding is that if I gain weight, then potentially I could have an unhealthy relationship with my body. And so in that story around motherhood, I would take that story and I would say, well, what's a beautiful way to replace that story? Or what is a beautiful affirmation to replace that story with? And so I would say, I'm so grateful that I get to have this experience of motherhood in my near future. I'm so grateful that I get to experience my body changing and that I get to create this gift of life. And so you could take any story that's showing up for you and just turn it into a positive reference. And that's what's so powerful. Once you become aware of the story, it's just about replacing it with something that's more powerful. And so you can always just say, I love my body. My body's unique. I love my body exactly as it is. I'm so thankful for my body that gives me life. All of those simple affirmations are so powerful just to pattern interrupt whatever's showing up for you in that moment.
Yeah. And you mentioned too, your body's always changing. I mean, I hated my body in high school because I was more muscular than all of the boys. And although I was getting to travel to all these insane places, competing for Team USA at the Olympic Games, there was nothing I hated more than my muscular body. I think I've matured a lot. I was in high school back then, and everyone in high school has their own insecurities about everything. So I think it's natural, but back a couple years ago, it used to be trendy and quote unquote cool to have really, really skinny bodies, as small as you can be. And now it's kind of trendy to have boobs, have a butt, have the Kardashian look. And who's to predict, what is the quote unquote cool thing that's going to come next?
Yeah. And I think that this brings up a really, really great point, that when I originally start working with my clients, there's this part that we really have to dive into, which is this acceptance and surrender piece. And so when you start to accept and surrender to the fact that beyond certain characteristics about your body, maybe changing your hair color or wearing makeup, there's not much we can do, right, to change our actual DNA and the body that we've been given. This is our genetics. This is who we are. And we have to accept and surrender that. And when you accept and surrender to the body that you've been given, and you can actually mourn the loss that you're not going to look like someone else. And this is a process of forgiveness, because you really have to look back on your entire life of all of the stories that you wanted to be and look like someone else. And through that process of that mourning, and through the process of really just accepting and surrendering to your body, we get to create this freedom that this is our body. This is what we've been gifted. And how do I use this body again to create impact and purpose and create the life of the feelings I'm desiring? So whether that be happiness and joy and creativity and inspiration, those are the things we're actually chasing. But so often we believe we're chasing the trends because that's what we've been told to believe, because that's what marketers want us to believe. So then they can sell us their products, right? So it's a complete mindfuck, honestly. I mean, most of our belief systems have been cultivated by marketers who are telling us that we're not worthy unless we buy what they're selling us. And that's the problem. And that's why I think social media is problematic. And that's why I think we need to again, reference and become self-aware when we see an ad that says, oh, you'll be happy with these fake eyelashes. And then we can hit, I don't want to see this anymore. Or we can literally hit delete, because we know that we're not actually going to be happy on the other side of the false eyelashes. We might enjoy them. We might love to have them as an expression of us, and that's completely okay. But to actually believe that they're going to give us this worth that we deeply desire is just a falsified experience. And I think the more that we, again, come back to our truth, start to cultivate these new stories based on our intuition and our self-awareness, then we get to make those powerful choices of saying, I don't want to see this anymore. Like, delete. I don't want this in my newsfeed. I am not going to pick up that magazine, even though it says get ready for summer in your bikini body. It's about making positive choices that reinforce these new stories.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point of, I think we've all fallen in the trap of wanting to alter our body in some way. Have you ever wanted to alter your body, or have you ever altered your body to, fit the times?
I have done, I have done many things. And the thing that recently has come up, which I've been very open about, is when I was in my early 20s, I actually called home, and I remember calling my father with so much shame. And I said, hey, I need you to sell my car. And he was like, why? I was like, oh, I just need, a bulk amount of money quickly. And he was worried. He was like, you've never called home for money. What's going on? Are you in trouble? And I was like, no, I'm getting breast implants. And at that time, I decided to get breast implants to extend my modeling career, because at that time I didn't have the courage to step into a new career, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And so I ended up getting breast implants to go into into catalog work. And for 10 years, I never thought about it. I literally remember going into the doctor's office and 2 weeks later coming out with implants. I had my friend pick me up. I went back to work in 4 days. No big deal. But the interesting thing is that when we alter our bodies, or when we change our bodies for someone else and not based on our own self-love, at some point that's going to catch up with us. And so for me, 10 years later, I had to do the inner work. I had to forgive myself when I was getting my explant surgery. I had to go through this whole process again of this story of, how can I teach people how to love their bodies when I'm struggling to love my bodies, and make this choice around explanting. And so it was a really interesting journey of forgiveness for me. And I believe that self-love exists on the other side of forgiveness, because the more that we can forgive ourselves for the choices that we make, the more we free ourselves and allow ourselves to step into that self-love that is really about, again, cultivating this experience with our bodies where we deeply, deeply honor our bodies for what they're giving us and the life that they're giving us. And so the breast implant illness conversation is a massive conversation right now, where a lot of women are getting sick from their implants. And I personally got sick. And so that was another piece of the equation where I felt so guilty and so shameful and so angry at myself that I had made this choice that ended up making me sick 10 years later.
How did it make you sick?
Yeah. So I ended up 2 years before I explanted, I started to develop symptoms. And these symptoms ranged from rashes all over my body, acne, pain under my armpits, joint pain. My fingers would swell up, bloating.
And how did you figure out that it was because of your implants?
So it was,
after all this time.
The power of social media, which there is a blessing of it, is that so many women have started to speak out about it. And for me, I was in denial. At the first couple times I saw people talking about their implants making them sick, I was like, no, there's no possible way. But I kept getting worse. I literally got to a place where I couldn't get out of bed. I was having to take naps from 3 to 6 p.m. before my husband got home, chronic fatigue, all the symptoms that are basically related to breast implant illness. There's like 30 or 40 of them. I was developing all of them, hair loss, everything. And I got to the place where I finally said, no amount of ego or wanting my body to look a certain way is worth this ever, or worth risking my health. And that's been one of the greatest lessons. I also think our bodies can provide us these lessons, these very powerful lessons that allow us to again, recognize the parts of ourselves that need to be healed on such deep levels. And then it impacts every area of our life, which is so profound.
Well, I know you preach a lot about the power of meditation. So switching gears just a little bit, what positive effects have you seen come from meditation as it relates to your relationship with food and your body?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting conversation because a lot of people think, well, how if I'm meditating, am I going to lose weight? I'm sitting there and I'm not even burning calories. And what's so interesting again is this is the belief system, right? The belief system that we've been told is if you want to lose weight, you have to burn more than you take in. And this is the mindset shift really becomes, well, indirectly, if you want to change behavior, then you have to change your internal experience with yourself. And meditation is one of the best ways to do this. And because the subconscious overrides 95% of our conscious mind, if you want to change the subconscious, you have to become aware of what you're changing. And so the beautiful thing about meditation and meditation completely transformed my life. It is the reason I believe I'm free of my eating disorders, is because it reprograms your neural network. So basically it helps us decrease loneliness. It makes us more hopeful. It promotes happiness. It improves our mood. It decreases anxiety and depression. It helps us overcome addictions like food addictions. It helps us be more compassionate with ourselves. It helps us sleep better. So all of these things indirectly help us when it comes to our relationship with food, because, for example, when we're happier, we're going to be better at taking care of ourselves. When we're less lonely, we're going to be less likely to eat at night alone because we're sad about being lonely. And so it's really powerful to witness this beautiful transformation that takes place when you start meditating. And the beautiful thing is different types of meditation reprogram different parts of the mind. And so I recommend, diving into any type of meditation that feels in alignment at this time, but then really starting to think about, okay, well, how do I make this a daily part of my practice and go beyond the mindfulness practices and really have this consistent practice that you can go to every single day that will, indirectly and directly impact your relationship with food and your body.
Okay, Sarah, I believe you. And I hear lots of successful people like yourself preach about how great meditation is. And when I was a gymnast, I would do visualization. I would close my eyes, see my routines. And I believe that. I saw the positive effects of that. I have tried for so long to do meditation, and I don't know. There's a disconnect. So what is step one? If you're like in my position where you don't even know, like, what are you supposed to be thinking about? Are you just supposed to be laying there? Like meditation 101 for beginners. Go.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, have you taken any classes or workshops or worked with a teacher, or is it more of just sitting there and then questioning if you're doing it wrong?
Yeah. Well, I took a life skills class in college as an elective, and we had to meditate for 10 minutes every day. And when you're meditating and you're not into it, 10 minutes is like hours. So they're playing like this, someone walking you through what you're supposed to be doing. And I think I just have like a restless energy about me anyway, where my brain is always like this. I'm like, it makes me more stressed out because I'm thinking about all the things that I really could be doing right now.
Right. So yes, I hear you. And that's what's so challenging. I hear you about meditation and even journaling, because the challenge is that people fear it because they don't want to recognize or address what's going on in their minds. And so the challenge then becomes, okay, well, if you can't sit for 10 minutes and be still, then what's really happening on a day-to-day basis, right? In terms of avoidance. And because when you can't be with yourself, when you can't be with your thoughts, you can't be with your emotions. So let's say you can't start with meditation, start with 10 to 20 minutes of just silence, nothing, and just be with yourself. And then start with an hour of being with yourself with nothing else, no distractions, no social media. Like even if it's just doing your own laundry, get comfortable with being with your thoughts. And then also with journaling, I think journaling is a beautiful gateway to meditation, because journaling allows you to start to put what's showing up in your subconscious mind on paper, and then you can address it and recognize that it's not as fearful as you probably believe it to be. And so to begin with meditation, I definitely recommend getting an incredible meditation teacher or going through an actual training. And so the two that I recommend is Chandresh Bardwa from Break the Norms, or Emily Fletcher. Her Ziva meditation course is an incredible place just to start, in the sense that it will give you the tools and the practices to use every day. And it's going to also address a lot of those concerns. And so your mind is not absolutely supposed to be still. You're not doing anything wrong. The act of meditating is, again, being with yourself and being with your thoughts and recognizing what thoughts come up. And what I like to share too is that, and as I shared and referenced a little bit earlier, is that often the answer that you're looking for in your life exists between the thoughts. And so everything that you have cultivated since you were a child, right? Everything you've taken on is what your mind is thinking. But if you want to actually create a better life for yourself, or to think about that product or that service you want to get out into the world, or the impact you want to have, often it's in the stillness that you hear that voice, because you're connected deeply with your awareness and with your intuition. And the more that you go within, the more you connect with yourself, the stronger your intuition is going to get. And when your intuition gets strong, that's when you can create these powerful choices in your life. So that's when you can go on social media and say, oh, not going to follow her anymore, and not even think about it. Or, not going to buy this magazine, or I'm going to, make a choice to no longer engage with this person because it doesn't feel good in my body. And so as your intuition gets stronger, your health and your well-being improves. And so often we are only focusing on the physical, right? The eating and the exercise, but we forget to work on our minds. And I believe, that meditation is one of the most powerful ways to do that, because it's impacting our behavior and what we do in relationship to our well-being. And people always say, well, how do you cultivate this beautiful, seamless experience with your body? Well, you do it through cultivating a stronger intuition. And through that intuition, then you make choices without having to really think about them. It's like, okay, well, my body feels this, so I want to, my body needs this, and I'm going to listen to my body, the wisdom of my body. So I'm just going to eat this today. If that lands. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You sold me. I'm going to give it another shot. I try it every once in a while.
Yeah.
I wrote down, the suggestions that you have. And it's funny because I talk to people, and all these people that I respect do it. I believe that it works. I just haven't gotten to the place where it has worked for me yet. And I'm sure that I just haven't been doing it the right way, but I'm going to give it another shot. But other than meditation, what are some tips for practicing self-love on a daily basis?
Yeah. So one of the things I do every single day is, in the morning, I have a gratitude practice where I close my eyes, I put my hand on my heart, and I connect to the gratitude of the day. And I actually visualize, like you shared, I visualize how my day is going to look from a place of empowerment and health. And so what are those choices that I'm going to make that are going to feel really good in my body and cultivate a deeper sense of well-being? And then at the end of the day, I do a forgiveness practice where I do the same thing, hand on the heart, close my eyes, and I forgive myself for any times throughout the day that I didn't potentially behave in a way that was serving towards my body or serving towards my health and well-being. And what this does is just clears you for the next day. And so those two practices alone have completely transformed so many of my clients' life, because it literally bookmarks your day and empowers you every day to reference what you did throughout the day, where you could have improved, but then it allows you to forgive yourself. Affirmations are really beautiful, like we talked about before. And then one of the practices that I really, really love is Mirror Work by Louise Hay. And this is the practice of, and you can do this in clothes or you can do this naked. I did a lot of this practice. A lot of mornings I was doing this naked, because this was around when I was explanting and having explant surgery. Is this process of looking in the mirror and just saying positive affirmations to yourself. And when you actually have to hear yourself say something positive about yourself, it can feel so uncomfortable. And then we recognize how challenging it is to be loving towards ourselves. And then we can move into this empowered place where within a few weeks or months of doing these practices, then you're standing in front of the mirror saying, I love you. I love my body. I love the fact that you carry me through this life. And it's a very different experience than most often the discomfort of even looking at yourself and saying positive things. And so I highly recommend that practice, Mirror Work by by Louise Hay. She has an entire program that has really transformed my life.
Those are some great tips on an individual level. And I think everyone can look in the mirror and probably point out so fast, like their top 3 to 5 things that they hate about their body. But then, you taking a second to think like, what do I really love about my body? And maybe not even from a beauty standpoint, but like what the function of my body and my limbs are doing for me that I don't appreciate enough. Changing that mentality, I think is so important. But as a society, is there something that we as a group could be doing to encourage more self-love?
So whenever anyone asks me this question, I always come back to do the personal work. Because when we do the personal work on ourselves, we will empower those around us. A really prime example is my husband. When my husband and I met, he never ate greens. He would never touch a vegetable. He literally ate pizza and pasta. That was his life. And I made a choice to not shame him or guilt him or ever make him feel bad about his choices around food or his body or if he moved every day or didn't. And over the last 6 years, now he's eating green smoothies in the morning and salads for lunch. And he's eating really healthy dinners and he's, running marathons and doing ice baths and biohacking his sleep. And it wasn't out of pushing him from a place of shame and guilt. It was pushing him out of, it was literally being a stance for my health and being a reflection of the inner work that I was doing and empowering myself to be healthy that inspired him. And I think we can only inspire from a place where we're in honest integrity within ourselves. And so it comes back to saying, where am I lacking in terms of my relationship with my body? Where could I improve my relationship with food so that my children see this beautiful relationship that I have with food, and then they're going to have this desire to also nourish their bodies. It's so interesting. I have a lot of parents that come to me and they say, oh, well, my children won't eat this or they won't do that, or I'm really worried because, they're starting to cultivate this negative relationship with their bodies. And then I always ask, well, what's your relationship with your body? What's your relationship with food? Your teen daughter is seeing that. And so what if we help you so you can help her? And this goes back to the responsibility piece, right? It really is about looking at ourselves and saying, I'm no longer going to use society and culture conditioning. And this goes back to even the genetic conversation where we can easily say that genetics have an impact on disordered eating and eating disorders. But if we use that as the excuse that I will always have disordered eating because my parents had it, or because my parents were addicts, or because there's addiction in my family, then we never take the responsibility role to say, well, what would it look like if I was the one to break this and to finally break this pattern and heal generations to come?
And I think that mentality is so contagious too, with the people that you surround yourself with. And I'm sure you can look at some of your friends and be like, okay, I feel really good when I hang out with them because the aura that they give off or the energy that I'm feeling from them, like you can tell they've done the work personally to then, they don't have to tell you about it. You can just feel their vibe and their energy when you hang out, that they're very comfortable and happy with themselves and proud of their body. And I think that's a really good tip, that if we work on ourselves, we're just naturally going to give that off more and more and more to all the people in our own lives. So hopefully it's like the domino effect.
And when we stay empowered in our truth and don't waver towards worrying about someone else's experience, then that also impacts them greatly. One of my best friends, Max Lugavere, we'll go out to dinner. And I remember when he got New York Times for his book, and my husband ordered him bottles of champagne and a cake and all these things. And he was just like, I'm not going to drink that just because I became a New York Times bestseller. It was this interesting experience in that moment. And it was so beautiful to watch him stand empowered. And we were all celebrating around him and cheering and popping champagne. And he was just like, no, I don't want to feel shitty tomorrow to have this experience. And I was so impressed by that empowerment. And he's just a voice for that. And I think that that's where we need to get, is this is my experience in my body. And I'm not going to feel worse because other people may feel disconnected or use this as, a lot of people use food as a way to basically create connection, right? And create great
Mm,
friendship. And it's like, we're going to go out to,
absolutely.
out to get drinks on Friday night. But the problem with that is like, well, what if that's not in alignment with you? And can you still have these friendships if that experience isn't happening? And if you can't, then it's time to reevaluate your friends. And so often when we do the work on ourselves with food and body, the other aspects of our life start to crumble, and that can feel really hard. But again, you're going to create the space for new friends and new relationships, and really be able to create the life that you deeply desire, that's based on energy and vitality and feeling really good.
That's a great story. And as much as I would love to ask you questions for days, we had a couple people call in, and I want to make sure that I ask you their questions. This is a segment called Ask a Friend. So for all of you listeners out there, if you haven't called in yet, my number is on my website, and you can call and leave a voicemail with your business, wellness, and personal development questions. So I've curated a couple of their questions for you, Sarah. Charlotte from Connecticut says, I have a best friend who I'm pretty sure she has an eating disorder. And when I've hinted at getting help, she has been really resistant. I care about her and I want to help her, but I don't know how.
Whew. Well, I'm so sorry that your friend is suffering. Man, this is a tough one. In thinking of how I would address this in a way that makes your friend feel very safe. Most often when, someone is experiencing an eating disorder or experiencing disordered eating, there's a lot of shame around that experience. And so I would be curious if there would be a safe space where you could ask and relate it to her health and her well-being, and voice your genuine concern while also not projecting any stories or truths that you have that might not be accurate. And so sometimes we can make an assumption that might not be true, or there might be layers upon layers under that again, we don't know about, right? And so another thing I might do is I might just provide and look up some really solid therapists and people that could support her, and just make sure she knows that you love her unconditionally, regardless of what she's going through. You are here for her, and here are some references in case she wants to seek out help with someone who can support her confidentiality and make sure that she feels safe in that experience. Because again, people don't want to talk about this. They don't want people to know about it. They're hiding. And the most important thing to do is to make sure that she knows that she is loved by you, even through this experience.
That's great advice. David in California says, how normal is it for guys to have an eating disorder? I feel like I'm struggling, but I'm too embarrassed to talk to anyone, because you never really hear people talk about this happening with guys.
Yeah, well, first, I'm so sorry that you're struggling. Although eating disorders are mostly associated with youth and femininity, men are also developing unhealthy relationships and an association with food and weight more than ever before. And so 40% of those with binge eating disorders are male. So I want to first empower you to think about the fact that this is a normal thing for men to go through. And again, to get that safe support where you feel like you can share from a safe place. And secondly, I would say that I don't love this word normal, because often we internalize that other people have to be struggling in order for it to be normal that we're struggling. And if you're struggling, that's one too many people struggling. And so I want to encourage you to get help, to seek someone again where it feels safe, to seek someone where it feels in alignment to share your truth, because again, addiction gets passed on to one thing and the next. So if you don't deal with this now, it's going to potentially continue. And so I just want to empower you to take those steps to really get the support that you need.
And I love what you just said about normal, because I think so many of us like have an issue or wake up with like a weird rash or, something. And you're like, is that the first thing you think is this normal? And I just really, really just want to have you repeat what you said, because that is so true to everything. Do you remember what you just said?
So we often internalize that other people have to be struggling for us to deem our issue normal, right? So, or we have to. Is that what I said? Like yeah. So like and it's interesting because I said it's normal for men to have eating disorders. And I want to recognize that even if you were the only person on the planet struggling with this disordered eating, it is enough to get help. You don't have to compare yourself. You don't have to be in this mindset that other people have to be struggling in order for you to receive the help, or that you're any less worthy of getting the help that you deeply desire because you're the only one struggling. And I think that that's the problem now, right? We look online and we say, well, no one else is going through this. Well, if you're unhappy and you're not feeling fulfilled and you're struggling internally, it doesn't matter that no one in your friend group or no one in your community is also going through it. Someone in the world is. And that gives you the permission, because you don't feel connected to your body, to get help.
That's great. Thank you. I hope for all the people in the back, hopefully they heard that, because I think that is such a powerful message. And lastly, Sandy from Oregon says, there's so many different loud voices in the wellness industry on TV or on Instagram or online preaching about supplements, diets, or everything in between. How can I figure out if something is truly healthy for me these days?
Yes, I love this question because when you Google diets, you're going to get 5 million results. So that just puts in perspective how much information is out there. And it's incredible, right? That we have more nutrition information than ever before. We can go on Google and find out pretty much anything nowadays. But
even for you, and I feel like I'm definitely don't have any certification you have, but I have a good basis on like what's healthy and what's not. But even for me, it's overwhelming, Sarah.
Yeah. So because of that, right? That's the piece where we go within. And that's the piece where we start to look at this bio-individuality. And what that means is there is no one size fits all. Each person is unique with highly individualized nutritional requirements, meaning that what works for you is going to be very different than what even works for maybe your sister or for your friend or for someone in your community or for someone who even is the same age as you. And so we have to start recognizing that your specific genetics, metabolism, anatomy, body composition, cell structure is different. And therefore, the mindset shift that I would take on is start to view your body as this beautiful experiment. Start to recognize that you get to try on different things and you get to connect with your body and recognize what works. The challenge with this, when I start to empower people to do this, is there often is a shame component where they feel bad that the new trend of coconut oil or the new trend of avocado toast doesn't work for their body. And so the place that I want to empower you is to start to think about, how do you shift that shame to gratitude? And when you start to shift to gratitude, then you can start to say, wow, I recognize that coconut oil makes my skin break out, or avocado toast doesn't feel good in my body. It makes me bloated. And even though everyone's talking about it, I'm so grateful that my body is sending me signals. I'm so grateful for the wisdom of my body that gets to reflect back to me what works and what doesn't. And so I always say it takes about 6 months to a year to go through the process of really connecting with your body and trying different things on. But when you do, you will get this incredible protocol that you have created. And beyond that, I always recommend working with a functional or integrative doctor to do testing, of course. But even then, there's no one better than you and the wisdom of your own body to really connect within and recognize what's working and what isn't.
That's great advice. Thank you. So we have one last segment of the show. It's called I Have Cool Recs. So since you're one of my cool friends, I'm assuming that you also might have some cool recommendations for all of our guests. So do you have any new recent favorite book recommendations?
Yeah. So my favorite book is called Break the Norms by Chandresh Bardwaj. And it's really about questioning everything that we know, which is what we've been talking about this entire podcast, questioning the stories that we've taken on about God and truth, life and death. He talks about sex and love, all of these different parts of ourselves that we've taken these stories on. They've been part of who we are, but maybe there's a new story that would be a better upgrade to how you're currently living.
That's cool. And also very relevant in this time where it seems like there's more of a political divide and divide with everything on social media. So it might empower everybody to have a little bit more compassion no matter what you believe.
Yes.
All right. What about a podcast recommendation?
So if you've enjoyed this conversation, another podcast that I highly recommend is the Hungry for Happiness podcast by Sam Skelly. She's really incredible at articulating some of these topics that we've talked about. And we're very aligned with cultivating self-love, self-worth, and self-esteem. So that might be a great one to dive into.
Awesome. And do you have a TV show or a movie recommendation?
A recent movie that I watched was more of a documentary, but it's called My Octopus Teacher. Have you seen it?
No. Where's it on?
I think it's Netflix, but it basically captures a year of this man's life as he spent with this octopus in the waters of South Africa. And it sounds weird, but it's kind of like different, but it's really profound in just allowing us to witness this relationship with nature that so many of us forget about.
Well, I love documentaries. That's like my favorite style of movie or TV entertainment. So I'll add it to my list for sure. And then do you have a friend that maybe is doing something noteworthy or cool in your eyes that you want to hype up?
Yeah. So my best friend, Alyssa Nobriga, is launching her certification program for coaches. And she is one of the most incredible coaches I've ever met in my life. I would actually hire her as a coach if she wasn't my friend. But there's that area where she can't be my therapist and my coach if we're friends. But the beautiful thing is she's launching this coaching certification. And why I love it so much is because right now there's more coaches than ever before. And so in order to become a successful coach, you actually have to get testimonials. You have to be transforming people's lives. And that's what she's helping people do. She's helping them through her process really understand how to transform their clients' lives on such an intimate, incredible level where they can grow their coaching businesses very, very quickly.
Great. And where can our listeners find her?
AlyssaNobriga.com.
Okay. Great. All right. We'll link it here too, so we can give her a little shout out. But thank you so much for being on the show and sharing all of your knowledge with us. How can our listeners follow you or find you on social media?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. The followers can find me on Instagram. Usually that's the best place. And I always respond to DMs. So at Sarah Anne Stewart on Instagram. And then my website is sarahanstewart.com. And we have lots of free challenges coming out and a body love quiz and some interesting things for 2021. So if you're interested in this topic and you want to learn more, you can find me there.
And Sarah just radiates self-love and inspiration. So for all of you guys just wanting a little bit more, and we could all use a little bit more self-love in our life, make sure to follow her on social media and check out her quizzes online. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so deeply grateful.
And for all of you listeners, thank you for listening. And again, don't forget to use the friend line to ask your questions about business, wellness, and personal development. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a comment, and get in on the follow-up conversation on our Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube channel. And as always, tune in next week for another new episode. See you then.